He was covered in tattoos, smelled like engine grease, and hadn't had a date in 3 years. She was 7 feet tall, had iridescent scales that shimmered like crushed amethyst, and secretly ruled over 42 star systems. Their coworkers thought setting them up was the funniest joke they'd ever pulled. They were wrong. It was the greatest love story the galaxy had ever seen. Kepler Station 7 was not glamorous. It was not the gleaming, chrome-plated kind of space station you saw on recruitment holovids. No. It smelled like recycled oxygen and old coffee. The corridors were always slightly too cold, and the vending machine on level 4 had been broken since the Galactic Trade Summit of 2387, which, for the record, nobody had fixed because nobody wanted to admit they were the one who broke it. It was, in short, the kind of place where people work very hard and complain about it constantly. And nobody embodied that spirit more completely than Kael Dominguez. Kael was the station's lead structural engineer, 34 years old. Born on New Madrid, Earth's scrappiest colony moon. He had the kind of hands that told a story, calloused, scarred, permanently stained faintly blue from hydraulic fluid that no soap in the known universe could fully remove. And the tattoos. Oh, the tattoos. Both arms completely covered. A galaxy map spiraling across his left shoulder. A mechanical wolf on his right forearm. Equations from his engineering doctorate running in a neat line behind his left ear. His coworkers on level 9 called him the Illustrated Man, which he pretended to hate and secretly found hilarious. He was not, by any reasonable definition, a fancy person. He ate lunch alone because he liked the quiet. He fixed things nobody else wanted to touch. He kept a battered copy of Applied Gravitational Physics, Volume 2 on his workbench not for reference. He had it memorized, but because it made him feel like himself. The joke started, as most jokes at Kep. Station 7 did, in the Level 6 break room. The culprits were 3 people, Dimitri from Cargo Logistics, Yenna from Atmospheric Systems, and a man known only as Big Cress from Security, whose actual name was Cresswell Okafor, but who had been Big Cress for so long that even his mother used it. They were eating synthesized noodles and doing what bored station workers do best, gossip. "Did you see the new diplomatic liaison?" Yenna whispered, leaning in like she was sharing classified intelligence. "The hybrid," Big Cress said, keeping his voice down. "The one from the Vaelthari delegation? She walked past me in the corridor this morning," Dimitri said, visibly shaken. "I almost dropped my entire tray. She's 7 feet of scales and terrifying beauty," Yenna offered. "I was going to say intimidating. She barely looked at me, and I apologized to her." Yenna stirred her noodles. Then, slowly, a very dangerous smile crossed her face. You know who would absolutely lose his mind being set up on a date with her? They all looked at each other and said, in perfect unison, "Kael." They were not being kind. They genuinely believed that Kael, tattooed, grease-covered, chronically awkward Kael, on a date with a Vaelthari diplomatic liaison, was the funniest thing they could possibly engineer. They half expected him to show up in his work boots. He did, in fact, show up in his work boots. But that comes later. Here is what Dimitri, Yenna, and Big Cress did not know about the woman they were treating as the punchline. Her real full name was Syravel Nyx Vael'Kira, daughter of the 13th moon, sovereign of the Vaelthari Reach, keeper of the deep sky accords, and queen of 42 star systems spanning 3 galactic arms. She had more titles than most people had words. And she was absolutely, completely, exhaustingly terrified of talking to new people. Yes, you heard that correctly. The queen of 42 star systems was shy. Not politically shy, mind you. She could address the Galactic Senate without breaking a sweat. She could negotiate trade agreements across species lines with the calm precision of a surgeon. She had once, famously, talked a rogue AI back from the edge of a full system shutdown using nothing but logic and a remarkably steady voice. But personal conversation, small talk, the terrifying, unpredictable, deeply informal act of just talking to someone who didn't want anything from her politically, that reduced her to silent, scale-flushing panic. Her aide, a brisk little woman named Tori, who had served her for 11 years, watched her pace the diplomatic quarters with deep concern. "You need to go outside," Tori said bluntly. "You've been on this station for 4 days, and the only places you visited are your quarters, the conference room, and a storage bay you wandered into by accident." "It was an interesting storage bay," Syravel said with great dignity. "It was full of broken vending machines." "They were interesting, broken vending machines." Tori handed her a data chip. "You have been invited on a date. The station's social coordinator thinks it would be good for interspecies relations." What Tori did not mention was that the station's social coordinator was Yenna from Atmospheric Systems, who had bribed a clerk, faked an interspecies cultural exchange program, and was currently across the station losing her mind with laughter. Syravel looked at the data chip. Her scales shifted, the Vaelthari equivalent of a blush, from deep violet to a soft, embarrassed rose. A date. 7 p.m. The Promenade Restaurant. Level 3. She almost said no. She almost said no 5 separate times between then and 6:45. Instead, she put on a simple gown the color of deep space, took a very long breath, and walked out of her quarters to meet a man she'd never heard of, set up by people who thought it was hilarious. Neither of them had any idea what was about to happen to them. The Promenade Restaurant on Level 3 was the nicest place on Kepler Station 7, which is to say it was a perfectly decent restaurant on a space station. It had mood lighting. It had tablecloths that were genuinely cloth and not recycled polyfiber. The menus had little digital holograms of each dish spinning above the text, which the chef was extremely proud of. Kael arrived at 6:58 because he was constitutionally incapable of being late to anything. He was wearing his best jacket, dark blue, no visible oil stains, over a black shirt. He'd run a comb through his dark hair approximately twice. He had not removed his work boots because he only owned one other pair of shoes and they were for funerals. He did not know who he was meeting. The message from Yenna had said only, blind date, level 3, 7 p.m., trust us. He had replied, I do not trust you even slightly. She had replied, 7 p.m. He had gone. He was sitting at the corner table, nursing a glass of synthetic mineral water and internally calculating the structural load limits of the restaurant ceiling, just because it calmed him down when the door opened. And the room did a thing. The room sort of stopped. Not all at once. Just a small ripple, like a stone dropped in water. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. A waiter walked directly into a cart. Kael turned to see what had caused it. And then he stopped too. She was tall, genuinely significantly tall, with a kind of presence that rearranged the architecture of a room simply by entering it. Her scales caught the mood lighting and scattered it in fractals, deep violet at her collarbone, fading to silver blue at her jawline, shimmering with a faint iridescence every time she moved. Her eyes were pale gold, and they swept the room with the practiced calm of someone who was very used to being looked at and very tired of it. She looked almost embraced, like she was waiting for something to go wrong. And then she saw the corner table. Saw him. Saw the blue jacket and the tattoos visible at the wrist, and the fact that he was staring at the ceiling. She blinked. He looked down. Their eyes met. He stood up, because his grandmother had taught him to, and said the first thing that came into his head, You're really tall. She stared at him. He stared at himself internally and wished for a structural collapse to escape into. I am aware, she said very carefully. Sorry. I meant sorry. Huh? I'm Kael. I have no idea what I'm doing here, and I want to be upfront about that. Yenna set me up, and I came out of morbid curiosity. Something shifted in those gold eyes. My aide set me up, she said after a moment. She said it was for interspecies cultural exchange. Kael pulled out her chair. I mean, that's one way to describe it. He paused. I'm guessing neither of us knew anything about this. Correct, she said, sitting. Okay, he said, sitting across from her. So we're both the joke. It appears so. He picked up his menu. Looked at the spinning holograms. Want to make them regret it? For the first time, just barely, just at the corner of her mouth where her scales faded to smooth skin, she almost smiled. Yes, she said. I believe I do. They ordered. Then something strange happened. They started talking. Kael, who rarely talked to anyone about anything that wasn't load-bearing infrastructure, found himself telling her about the wolf tattoo on his forearm, how it was his mother's design, how she had been a xenobiologist who spent 6 years on a survey vessel before she came back and had him, how he got the tattoo at 19 because he wanted to carry some part of her travels on his skin. Syravel listened with a specific quality of attention that very busy, very important people rarely have anymore, complete. Unhurried. Like he was the only person in a room that had, from her perspective, held a great many people wanting a great many things. She sounds like she was extraordinary, she said. She was a disaster in a wonderful way, Kael said, grinning. She once accidentally filed a survey report on a previously undiscovered moon in the name of her cat. Is the moon still listed under the cat's name? Technically, yes. There's an asteroid in the Kepler belt formerly recorded as Mr. Kael Dominguez. It's a whole thing. And she laughed. It was, and there is no other word for it, unexpected. Not the polished, controlled sound of someone performing amusement. A real laugh startled out of her that turned two heads at nearby tables. Her scales flickered. She pressed a hand to her mouth almost reflexively, like she was surprised at herself. Kael watched her, this ridiculous, magnificent, complicated, beautiful person across the table who had just laughed at his mother's cat, and thought, oh, I'm in trouble. I apologize, she said, composing herself. For what? He essayed. Adi. She blinked. For laughing. Why would you apologize for that? She opened her mouth, closed it, tilted her head slightly, scales shifting to a color Kael didn't have a name for her, something between silver and embarrassed. I don't often, she said at last. Laugh? In public. Seems like a waste, he said simply, and picked up his fork. Syravel Nyx Vael'Kira, sovereign of 42 star systems, stared at the tattooed engineer across the table. Nobody had ever told her that her laughter was not wasted. Not a single person in her entire life. They stayed until the restaurant was half empty. They walked the promenade after dinner because neither of them was quite ready for the evening to be over, and neither of them was willing to say so. The promenade on Kepler Station 7 ran along the outer ring, floor-to-ceiling transparent steel, on one side looking out into open space. Stars wheeled slowly past as the station rotated. It was, objectively, the one genuinely beautiful thing about Kepler Station 7, and both of them knew it. Syravel walked with her hands clasped behind her back, her gown dark against the starlight. Kael walked beside her. He realized, not nervous anymore. This was unusual. Kael was frequently nervous around new people. He chalked it up to exhaustion and kept going. You fixed the structural issue on level 11, she said suddenly. He glanced at her. How do you know about that? I read the station reports when I arrived. All of them. The microfracture in the outer hull coupling was flagged as a non-priority repair. She paused. You fixed it your first week here. Before anyone asked you to. He shrugged. It was going to be a problem in 8 months. Why wait? Most people don't see problems that far ahead. Most people don't like thinking about what could go wrong. And you do. I like knowing the load limits, he said, of things. So I know when they're close to breaking. She was quiet for a moment. That is, she said carefully, a very interesting thing to say on a first date. He looked at her. She looked at him. There was a beat of crystalline silence between them. Was this a date? He asked. I believe so, yes. Ah, he said. Is that a problem? No, he said. Just adjusting my expectations for how Yenna is going to be insufferable about this tomorrow. Her scales shimmered gold. Not embarrassment this time. Something warmer. My aid will be equally impossible, she said. They reached the lift. Stop. I want to see the broken vending machines, he said. She blinked. I beg your pardon. Tori told you they were in a storage bay. I'm the one who broke them. All 3 of them. I was testing a new pneumatic coupling, and I slightly overestimated. Actually, can I see them? I've been meaning to go back. She stared at him. Then, that is the strangest thing anyone has ever said to me after a first date. Is that a yes? That is absolutely a yes. Yes. Spent 40 minutes in a storage bay on level 8 with 3 broken vending machines. And it was, Syravel would later tell Tori, one of the better evenings of her adult life. Kael pulled the casing off the first machine with practiced ease and explained what he'd done wrong, and then what actually went wrong, and then what he was going to fix, and she listened and asked precise, intelligent questions that made him stop and look at her 3 separate times. Where did you study engineering? She asked at one point. I didn't, he said. Not formally. I have a doctorate in applied gravitational physics, but I'm mostly self-taught on the mechanical side. Self-taught, she repeated. People throw away a lot of good machines, he said with a shrug. I grew up taking them apart. What did you build? He smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that belongs to private memories. My first ship when I was 17. It was held together with about 40% hope and 60% structural wire. Flew it once. Made it to the second moon of New Madrid before the port thruster gave out. What did you do? Sat there for 6 hours looking at the stars until a cargo hauler picked me up. Were you frightened? I was elated, he said, and meant it entirely. She was very quiet. I have never done anything like that, she said, and the way she said it was not wistful. It was matter of fact. The tone of someone reporting a gap in data rather than mourning it. But Kael heard both things at once. He put down the coupling wrench and looked at her. Why not? I have had responsibilities since I was 14. What were you like at 13? She paused. Loud, apparently. I'm told I climbed the walls of the palace. Literally. The North Tower. Repeatedly. He grinned. That tracks. Does it? You ask questions the way someone does when they've been told to stop asking questions for a very long time, he said simply. It means you were curious. You don't lose curious. She looked at him for a long moment. In the cold light of a level 8 storage bay, surrounded by broken vending machines, Syravel Nyx Vael'Kira felt something she hadn't felt since she was 13 years old climbing the walls of the North Tower. She felt like herself. I should go, she said. I have an early diplomatic session. Yeah, he said. Neither of them moved. Same time tomorrow, he said. The restaurant is quite good, she agreed. He smiled. She walked to the door. Stop. For the record, she said, not turning around. My name is Syravel. Most people call me Vael'Kira, or Your Highness, or various other titles I have accumulated. Kael, he said. Most people call me the guy who smells like engine coolant. Fair warning. I know, she said. I noticed. She left. Kael sat in the storage bay with the broken vending machines for another 20 minutes. Then he went home and, for the first time in 3 years, could not stop smiling. 12 days. That is how long it took. 12 days of dinners that ran too late. 3 more visits to the storage bay. A walk along the outer ring at 2 in the morning when neither of them could sleep. An afternoon where he brought his battered copy of Applied Gravitational Physics and she brought a Vaelthari star chart that was older than the station, and they sat side by side in the observation lounge and didn't talk for most of it, and it was, somehow, the best afternoon either of them had had in years. He told her about the engineering core job he'd turned down twice because it would have meant leaving New Madrid's moon while his mother was sick. She didn't offer condolences. She asked, was it the right choice? And he said, every day. And she nodded like she understood the entire weight of that. She told him about the Accord negotiations, not the politics of it, but the exhaustion. The way she sat in rooms full of people who wanted pieces of her and gave them the pieces and went back to her quarters and was very quiet. He didn't say, that sounds hard. He said, what do you do when you want to think? She said, I look at maps. He said, me too. Star charts or architectural blueprints. She said, both depending on the week. And something in his face went very, very still in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. Yenna, Dimitri, and Big Crest watched this happening from various points around the station with a dawning horror of people who set a trap and caught something they absolutely did not plan for. It worked, Yenna whispered. It really worked, Dimitri confirmed. I think they might actually like each other, Big Crest said. This isn't funny anymore, Yenna said. I'm frightened. They had not yet realized exactly how unfunny it was about to become. Because on day 13, the Galactic Cultural Affairs Bureau arrived on Kepler Station 7 for a routine documentation visit. And the Bureau's senior archivist, a small fussy man named Director Pellick, who wore his credentials on a visible badge the way some people wear armor, was in the Promenade restaurant for lunch when he saw Syravel come in and, without thinking, fell into a deep formal bow. Lady Sovereign, he said. Sovereign Vael'Kira of the Vaelthari Reach. What an honor. The restaurant went completely silent. Kael, who had been cutting into a piece of whatever passed for protein on Kepler Station's menu that week, stopped. He looked at Pellick. He looked at Syravel. He looked at the way every head in the restaurant had turned. The way the wait staff were now standing differently. The way Director Pellick was using the words sovereign and reach and 42-star systems in a breathless, falling over himself tone that Kael had heard exactly once before. In a history archive, refer. ING to the head of an interstellar empire. He looked back at Syravel. Her scales, which had been warm gold all morning, had gone completely still. The color drained to a careful, controlled silver. She was looking at him. You're a queen, he said. It was not a question. She came to find him 3 hours later. He was in the level 8 maintenance corridor, which was his equivalent of taking a walk when his brain needed to work something out. She found him because she asked Tori, and Tori knew because Tori knew everything. He was sitting on an equipment crate, a hydraulic coupling in his hands, not fixing it. Just holding it. You should have told me, he said. He wasn't angry. That was somehow worse. Yes, she said. I've been on 12 dates. Are they even dates? With a sovereign of 42 star systems. He turned the coupling over in his hands. I told you about my mom's cat. His name is on an asteroid, she said quietly. I think about that often. He looked up. That's not the point, Syravel. I know. She sat down on the crate beside him. Not across from him. Beside him. I didn't tell you because when I tell people, they change. Her voice was very even. Practiced. The way they look at me. The way they talk. What they ask for. She paused. You didn't ask for anything. I asked you about broken vending machines. Yes, she said. And I have not been able to stop thinking about how strange and wonderful that was. He was quiet. I'm an engineer on a space station, he said. I own 3 jackets and a toolbox. I know. I can't take you to 42-star systems worth of fancy restaurants. I know. I eat synthesized protein for lunch 4 days a week. Kael, I'm just establishing the facts, he said. I know the facts, she said. And the careful evenness in her voice cracked, just slightly, the way good metal does under pressure, not breaking, just showing its grain. I know the facts. I also know that you are the only person in 11 years who has asked me what I was like before I was a sovereign, and listened to the answer, and then said something that made me feel like climbing walls again. He turned the coupling over one more time. Set it down. You could have told me, he said again. I was afraid, she said simply. Of what? That you would bow. He looked at her. She looked back. He stood up, held out his hand, the one with the galaxy map tattooed across the knuckles, and said, I don't bow to anyone. Just so we're clear on that. She looked at his hand. Then she took it. I know, she said. It's one of my favorite things about you. Here is the thing about falling in love on a space station with a queen of 42 star systems. The rest of the galaxy does not stay quiet about it. The news broke 3 weeks later when a diplomatic courier happened to spot them in the observation lounge, sitting shoulder to shoulder, his star charts and her Vaelthari map spread across the same table like a collision of two worlds that had decided they liked each other. The courier told someone. That someone told a journalist. The journalist posted a single image. The headline read, Vaelthari sovereign romantically linked with human station engineer? And then the galaxy lost its collective mind. Kael's face was everywhere, on every news feed, every diplomatic dispatch. The Galactic Social Bureau issued 3 separate statements. His supervisor on Level 9 forwarded him 1,400 messages with increasingly creative subject lines before his inbox crashed. Yenna, Dimitri, and Big Cress held an emergency meeting in the Level 6 break room. We did this, Dimitri said. We absolutely did this, Yenna confirmed. Are we in trouble? Big Cress asked. Nobody answered because nobody knew. Kael took it the way he took most things, by ignoring it until it became an engineering problem. He changed his comm address. He put an out-of-service sign on his workshop door that he had actually printed himself. He ate lunch in the storage bay for 2 weeks. Syravel was less serene. Not because of the attention, she was used to attention, but because the attention brought opinions, and the opinions were, to put it diplomatically, mixed. There were delegates who quietly suggested her association with a common worker was not in keeping with the dignity of the Reach. There were advisors who sent carefully worded communiques about image and expectations. And one evening, after a particularly exhausting session with exactly those people, she walked into the storage bay on Level 8 and found Kael sitting on his crate, apparently in the middle of fixing vending machine number 2, wearing an expression that she had come to recognize as his thinking something through face. They gave you a hard time today, he said, not looking up. How did you know? You walked past the mark on the floor you always stop at when you're happy to be here. He glanced over. You're 3 steps further in. She stood very still. 42 star systems, she said. I know. Dozens of advisors. Thousands of years of Vaelthari succession protocol. 700 documented diplomatic precedents that my choice of companion could affect. I know. And a man who counts my footsteps from a mark on a storage bay floor. He looked up at that. I count everything, he said. It's how I know what's worth keeping. Syravel Nyx Vael'Kira, sovereign of the Vaelthari Reach, had in her possession a legal instrument, an ancient one, older than the Galactic Senate, called a Riot Claim. Claiming, right? A formal declaration of sovereign personal bond that, under Vaelthari law, elevated a chosen partner to a protected status equivalent to a member of the royal household. It was not often invoked. It had very significant implications. She had asked her archivist about it 2 weeks ago. He had been carrying the paperwork for 4 days. She had told herself she was waiting for the right moment. She realized, standing 3 steps further into a storage bay on Level 8 while a tattooed engineer fixed her broken vending machines, that she had been waiting because she wasn't sure he'd want it. I need to ask you something, she said. He set down the wrench. What does a Riot Claim do, exactly? He asked. She stared at him. How do you know that term? He looked faintly sheepish. I read your culture's legal archive. All of it. It was a slow Thursday. She pressed both hands to her face. Kael, is it more or less serious than I think it is? It is significantly more serious than most people think it is. Okay, he said. It makes you a formal member of my household under Vaelthari law. It grants you protections I cannot revoke. Okay, he said again. It also means that anyone who attempts to harm you, threaten you, or otherwise target you in order to influence me will be dealing with the full force of the Vaelthari Reach's legal and, if necessary, military response. He blinked at that. Have you ever had to use that part? Once, she said with a tone that closed the subject permanently. He was quiet for a moment. And the other direction, he said carefully. She tilted her head. I can look after myself too, he said. Not defensive, just clear. I want you to know that. Her scales went gold. I know, she said softly. It's another one of my favorite things about you. Here is how a love story does its real work. Not in the grand moments, though there were grand moments. Not in the first confession or the claiming ceremony or the night that 3 separate diplomatic delegations sent congratulatory messages they absolutely did not mean. The real work happened in the quiet. It happened in the Vaelthari Reach's Parliament Hall, 6 months after Kepler Station 7, when Syravel was giving an address on resource allocation that she had rewritten 4 times because she kept softening the language. She stopped in the middle of the 4th version and thought he wouldn't soften it. Not because Kael was harsh, he wasn't, but because he said what he meant clearly and let people decide what to do with it. She rewrote it a 5th time, said exactly what she thought. The Parliament was quiet for a very long moment. Then they voted unanimously in her favor for the first time in 6 years. She told him about it that evening over a calm call spanning approximately 2 star systems because she was on the Reach and he was finishing a project on Kepler and they were doing long distance in the way of 2 people who were both very good at patience. I just said what I thought, she said. Yeah, he said. You're good at thinking. You say that like it's obvious. Because it is. Most people in my position don't speak plainly. Most people in your position, he said, are worried about keeping the position. You're not. You just forget sometimes. She was quiet. I'll remind you, he said simply. She held the comm unit for a moment. Come home soon, she said. As soon as the coupling clears inspection, he said. 3 days. You said 3 days last week. The coupling disagreed with me. She smiled. He came home in 4 days. The coupling had held firm. And the real work happened the other direction too. Kael had spent a decade being extremely good at his job and very careful never to let anyone notice him doing it. It was not modesty exactly. It was the particular habit of someone who had learned somewhere early that standing in the light meant standing in the way of things falling. It was easier to work from the edges. Quieter. Safer. Syravel noticed. She noticed the way he solved problems that weren't his department without mentioning it. The way his ideas showed up in other people's reports without his name. The way he'd been passed over for 2 senior positions because he never applied. Why? She asked him one evening over a map spread between them that was now, famously, across 3 galactic news networks, their map. Her Vaelthari star charts and his architectural blueprints, interleaved until you couldn't tell which world belonged to which person. He was quiet for a while. It was easier, he said. In the background. Easier than what? Than being seen and being wrong. She put down the chart. You fixed a microfracture on level 11 before anyone asked you to, she said. You diagnosed a cascade failure on a plasma coupling using 3 hours of audio data and a feeling. You rebuilt an entire docking arm design from scratch in a week because you didn't like the load distribution. She looked at him steadily. When have you ever been wrong about anything structural? He opened his mouth. I'm not asking about personal life. I'm asking about the work. He closed his mouth. Come forward, she said quietly. He thought about a 17-year-old boy in a broken ship above the second moon of New Madrid, looking at the stars for 6 hours. He thought about being elated. He applied for the senior engineering director position the following Monday. He got it the same week. It is 3 years later. The observation lounge on Kepler Station 7 has been renovated. There are new panels in the transparent steel wall, better light refraction, longer warranty, a structural improvement that the new engineering director quietly insisted on when the budget came up for review. Nobody mentioned whose idea it was because some habits die slowly. But there's a small engraving in the lower left corner of the largest panel, barely visible, put there by a maintenance tech who owed Kael a favor. K+S load-bearing. It is, for those who know them, accurate. The map table in their quarters, plural, now on a residential station in the inner reach, is a spectacular me. SS Vaelthari star charts. Engineering blueprints for a new docking complex on the Reach's 4th moon, which is being built to Kael's specifications. 2 empty mugs. A book. A toy shaped like a small mechanical wolf. The toy was not bought by either of them. It was brought at high velocity by a 4-year-old who has her mother's scales and her father's absolute refusal to accept that anything is too broken to be worth fixing. Her name is Mira. She has also just learned to climb. She has, in the past 3 months, climbed the bookshelves in the study, the exterior frame of a shuttle bay observation window, one particularly climbable ambassador, and a wall in the diplomatic quarter of the Reach that she scaled 7 times before her father caught her and the 8th time before her mother stopped pretending she wasn't watching. Her father picked her up, looked her in the eye, and said, I'm going to teach you to do that safely. But not where your mother can see. Her mother said from around the corner, I can hear you. Her father said, noted. Mira said, again. There is also a 6-month-old. He sleeps more than his sister and has his father's dark hair and no scales yet, though the family physician says they may come in later. He is currently asleep in the next room while chaos happens gently around him, which is either remarkable composure or very sound sleeping, and his parents are taking bets. Yenna, Dmitri, and Big Cress received an invitation to the claiming ceremony and attended in a state of disbelieving wonder. Yenna cried. Dmitri tried not to. Big Cress cried immediately and did not try to stop at all. They have dined out on the story. We set them up, actually, for going on 3 years. They are insufferable about it. They have earned it. Tori, Syravel's aide, when asked by a journalist what she thought of how things had turned out, replied, I told her she needed to go outside. I stand by that assessment. Director Pellick, whose moment in the Promenade restaurant began the unraveling, received a formal note of thanks from the Sovereign's office. He still doesn't fully understand why. The vending machines on level 8, it should be noted, were fixed. All 3 of them. They work perfectly. Nobody touches them. They are considered, by the station staff, to be historical. And in the observation lounge at the end of a long day, when the second shift is cleared out and the stars are turning slow circles in the dark beyond the glass, the best transparent steel in the station, load-bearing, engraved in the corner, 2 people sit at their table. Her charts. His blueprints. The map that belongs to both of them now. Her scales are warm gold. His hands are, it must be said, still faintly blue. She says, you know this started as a joke? He says, I know. She says, they though. Thought it was funny. He says, they weren't wrong. She turns to look at him. He's already looking at her. Best blind date in the galaxy, he says. And she says, very quietly, like someone setting down something she's carried a long time and finding the ground solid beneath it. Best anything. Maybe destiny starts with a joke among work colleagues. Maybe it starts with a blind date nobody took seriously. Maybe it starts in a storage bay on level 8 with 3 broken vending machines and a man who asks the right question. Or maybe, just maybe, it starts the moment 2 people decide to stop letting the galaxy tell them who they're supposed to be and figure it out together from the ground up. Like any good structure. Load-bearing. For more Beyond the Stars love stories, like and subscribe, and in the comments let us know where you are from, and let all your stories end with a simple claim.